Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. And today, we're going to be taking a look at one of the most luxurious cars out there. We're going to be taking a look at something that basically brought the Rolls Royce company back from the dead. What we have inside this box is a Rolls Royce Phantom. I picked this up because I didn't want to spend 300 euros or more on the officially licensed 118 Kyosho. And I also didn't want to be satisfied with a 143 version, which is not only smaller than this, but also has no opening parts. And XLG, the company that made those 143s, used a red paint for the tail lights that evaporated over time, leaving the tail lights white. So, in order to avoid all that, I decided for this fully opening 124 AliExpress version, but I made some improvements to it to make it look more like the real thing. So let's unbox it. Now, as you can see, this is made by a company called XLG, and I imported this, of course, from China. Here you can see all the Chinese lettering. It comes in two different versions. This is the one that we'll be reviewing, but in a different color. And then they also made the boat tail, which I think is called the Rolls Royce Swept Tail. All right, let's get it out of the box. Comes in this styrofoam packing. And now it is time to reveal it. And here it is. The 124 Rolls Royce Phantom. This car, the Phantom VII, is the first Rolls-Royce after BMW took over in 1997, and it was launched in 2003. From 2003 till 2009, the Phantom VII was the only car Rolls-Royce was making. 2009 was when they added the smaller Rolls-Royce Ghost to the lineup, which I have reviewed in 143. Now this is the sedan. Next to this there's also a Phantom Coupe, which is the two-door hardtop, and the Drophead Coupe, which is the two-door soft-top convertible. Production of the Phantom VII lasted for an entire 14 years, all the way up to 2017, when it was succeeded by the Phantom VIII. This particular car is the Phantom VII Series 1, which was made from 2003 to 2012. The Phantom VII Series 2 was made from 2012 to 2017, and the way you can tell them apart is the Series 1 had circular fog lamps, while the Series 2 had horizontal ones. So the 118 version made by Kyosho is considered one of the holy grails of luxury sedan collectors. Not in terms of rarity, because they've released it in a couple of different colors now, and it shouldn't be too hard to find one, but simply in terms of what it represents. And I had the chance to buy a black 118 Kyosho Phantom VII back in early 2019 for €200 from Modellissimo. They only had one model in stock, and I hesitated because it had a dark brown interior instead of a brighter interior like beige or grey. So I spent 10 days or so trying to decide whether I should make the investment, and by that time, bam, someone took it, and I was never able to find one for €200 again. I mean, these days it's like well over 300, even 400 depending on the color. So I thought, okay, can I get something else? And that's when I came across this, a model sold on AliExpress titled as 1/24 scale, but in reality more like 1/30th. But with a feature that the Kyosho doesn't have, namely functioning lights. Of course, nowhere near the same in quality. No carpeting, no hood struts, no fine detailing like movable front seats, opening glove compartments, movable armrests, nothing of the sort. But one that, from afar, still looks like a Phantom VII. And for $25, I was like, okay, let me get it. And here it is. Let's begin our review, shall we? So taking a look at the front of the Rolls Royce Phantom VII, you can see that the front is done pretty well by XLG. I mean, they really did manage to capture the front look of the Rolls Royce, and that is especially evident in the form of this magnificent giant front grille, which I believe Rolls Royce calls the waterfall grille. You can see that the individual bars are very nicely visible and are made out of chrome. The only thing that's missing is the Rolls-Royce logo underneath the hood ornament, the Spirit of Ecstasy. But apart from that, the front actually looks really convincing. I mean, we also have the headlights, and I think that the headlights are also done very nicely. Keep in mind that they have the LEDs inside them, so they're not supposed to be very realistic looking, but they still managed to mold the bulb in such a way that it doesn't take away from the aesthetic of the headlamp itself. Underneath the headlamps we have the two fog lights. Now these are not separate lights, they're just chrome pieces, so they could have been done maybe a little bit better, but they still look good. And of course underneath that we have the front license plate. It says M923S, and it is flanked by two chrome pieces that are basically the guards of air intakes. And then at the top we have the hood ornament, the Rolls-Royce Flying Lady, also known as the Spirit of Ecstasy. Now, I'm surprised by the level of detail for this 1/30th in reality model. I mean, yeah, sure, it doesn't have all the details, but they still managed to capture the overall stance pretty well. So I'd say it looks good. Now, one problem that my model has is you can see that there is a noticeable panel gap behind the grille, because the hood is supposed to shut like this, right? But unfortunately it doesn't, and it has that gap. But considering that the model is in black, it really hides it pretty well, I'd say. Now let's get the hood open. And to do that, we actually get a button underneath here, as you can see. So if I press that button, the hood will open. Let me just do that real quick. And it opens about this far up. And this is supposed to be a 6.75 liter V12 with around 454 horsepower, which is funny because originally BMW wanted to put a 9 liter V16 engine into the Rolls Royce Phantom. but eventually decided for a V12. Now, the detail level is actually not bad for an AliExpress model. I mean, sure, it could be done better, but this looks convincing, I'd say, especially under the right light conditions. And look, it even has suspension. Now let's talk about the length of the model. As I mentioned earlier, this model is underscaled, so it's more like 1/30th scale instead of 1/24. As you can see, it has a length of approximately 19.8 centimeters, and in reality, 1/24 scale is supposed to be 25.38 centimeters. So it's supposed to be this long, right? And that makes it notoriously underscaled. But, I mean, it still looks good. And taking a look at the side of the Rolls Royce Phantom VII, first thing worth pointing out is this is the extended wheelbase variant, noticeable by the fact that the rear passenger windows are wider than the front windows. Also, the side is probably where I did most of the changes to the model. For starters, you can see that I put Rolls-Royce hubcaps for the wheels because the model didn't come with them and it was just a blank chrome hubcap. And I think that now it looks a lot better. Unfortunately, of course, I just printed it out and didn't really manage to install, the mechanism where if you move the car, it would stay in place. So that is not possible. But otherwise, I still think that it looks good. And I basically took a Word document and placed a round Rolls-Royce logo in it with a length of, I think it's 4 millimeters. So that way it would fit here, and then I cut it out, and then I pasted it with some normal paper glue. So, let's take a look at the wheels. Now, these wheels are made out of chrome, and they look like the real wheels. Unfortunately, however, the chrome is kind of starting to come off on my model. I don't know if you can see that properly here, but this model is only 3 years old. Like, I bought this in 2019, and already, like, if you pay close attention to the spokes, you can see that the center part is no longer chrome. It's sort of like plasticky, like matte plastic. So I don't know why that's happening, but there's nothing I can do about it. Anyway, behind we also don't really have brake discs or anything like that. There seems to be something in the way, but it's kind of hard to see. We do get a rear indicator and a front one as well. Now, the second improvement that I did to the model is you can see that I've installed windows. And these windows really help sell the model, Like, when I purchased this model, it didn't have any side windows at all. It was just holes. So now it actually kind of looks a little more expensive. The windows really help make it look a little more expensive than without them. Of course, it makes opening the doors a little more difficult, but you can do that if you just dig your fingernails in between them, so that's not too much of an issue. Another thing that I don't like about this model is that this rear window over here is just black, so they didn't bother to put another window here. But yeah. And taking a look at the back of the 124 Rolls Royce Phantom VII, the back of the Phantom has never really been particularly aesthetic. I mean, they sort of ran out of ideas of how to make this look good, but you can't really blame the model because it does look like the real car. The only thing that I added to the back is the Rolls-Royce logo on the chrome trunk handle. Ideally, it should have been gray instead of black, but I just decided to use the black one, and I think it still looks good. Underneath, of course, we have the rear license plate saying M923S. And if we take a look at the taillights, right next to the indicators, you can see that the taillights are separate pieces. Don't have much detail, unfortunately, and the chrome bezel is kind of thick around them. Could have been a little thinner, but otherwise they do look like the taillights of the real Rolls-Royce Phantom, which is to say that it is not particularly exciting. The rear windshield has some scratches on mine, unfortunately, but is otherwise anyway quite small, just like on the real car. Oh yeah, and I also added some kitchen foil for the mirrors because they only had the body-colored mirror sculpts and no actual mirrors. But now it looks a little bit better. The cool thing about the back, though, is that it actually opens, just like the front and the doors. So, fully opening 1/24 scale model. And inside, we really don't have much to see here. I mean, there's just like some texture, but otherwise it's quite smooth. At least it's not fully black. And it's a decent amount of space. And now let's take a look at the interior of the Rolls Royce Phantom VII. And you can see the unique way that the doors open on this model. These are referred to as coach doors. So if we take a look at the interior, you can see that we have a brown interior. Let's first take a look at the front, so I'll just close this first. Surprising level of detail for a 1/30th AliExpress model. You can see that we have some buttons molded onto the center console right there. Lots of them actually. And we also have some buttons underneath the dashboard. They aren't painted or anything, but they're there. And the door panel is okay. I painted the speakers in silver as well as the door handle in silver because they were all just this sort of wood color. And here I think you can get an idea of the texture that they used. Sort of has a little bit of texture to it. It feels almost like it's painted, but it's supposed to represent some kind of veneer. Anyway. And taking a look at the driver's side of the Rolls Royce Phantom, you can see that here I also added the Rolls Royce logo to the steering wheel, which didn't have a logo before. Behind the steering wheel you can see that we have some gauges, although there's nothing printed on them, but they're there. We also get some floor pedals, which are also unpainted, and the armrest, which is openable on the Kyosho, is here, of course, just molded. The seats have a decent texture. Not too much detail, but still something. So let's now take a look at the back. So as you can see that on the Rolls Royce Phantom we have plenty of legroom, right? That's like one of the biggest features for the rear passengers. No carpeting, as I said. This is just a 1/30th model. And if you look at the rear seats, there is like a hump there in between them, and that's actually just to make room for the pullback mechanism of this car. So apart from that, though, the rear is spacious and has some level of detail, and that's about it. I mean, we don't really get much else in terms of detail. We do get like a little bit of a headliner, but nothing else. There's really not much else in terms of detail. So yeah. And taking a look at the bottom of the car, you can see that here we have some detail in the form of the exhaust system and the mufflers, and the exhaust tips, although they're not painted. It says XLG. And then we have here the battery compartment with a little screw to change the cells, and if I pull that tab out, the light show can begin. So let's do that. So if you want to own a Phantom VII, this is the only fully opening alternative to the $400 Kyosho. But it requires some work, like with the windows and customized hubcaps, to look the part. And it is still underscaled. A more expensive and smaller alternative without opening parts is Kyosho's 143 Phantom, and I believe there's some in 164 as well. But I'm happy with the work I put into mine, so if you're interested in more Rolls-Royce reviews, you can check them out here. I hope you liked this video. Take care, have a wonderful day, and this is Imperial Diecast, signing out.